Do you want to scale your app but have no experience building unbreakable backends? I have spent 15 years building and scaling backends, and in this video I'm going to show you a step-by-step way to build your own backend so you can scale with confidence and avoid costly mistakes later on. And I will also provide a set of prompts that you can use to simplify each step. So now, before we go into the how, we need to talk about when. And there is a specific moment when building your own backends actually makes sense. And that moment is after validation. So once your idea works, customers are paying and the growth is happening, at that point, reliability becomes critical. And the reason is simple. We don't want to optimize too early something that no one wants to buy. So if you are at this stage, keep watching because this video can literally save your company. So what happens once you have paying customers? I always tell my team that the moment we onboard the first customer, there is a shift in priorities. So during development, so when you have no customers or just beta users, downtime is annoying or inconvenient. But when you have paying customers, downtime becomes expensive and business continuity is a must. More importantly, you need to consider that the value of the business directly depends on the quality of the backend. Because think about investors, they don't want to buy a house of cards, they want to buy a business with solid foundation. And this brings us to the next big problem. So what companies traditionally do when they realize their backend isn't ready to scale. So historically, when companies reach this stage, they do two things. The first one is to hire developers or bring in consultants. And the second, they get told by these developers and consultants to rebuild their architecture or at least rewrite a large part of the system. And their logic is very simple. If the system is fragile, rebuild it properly. But large rebuilds are slow, expensive, and extremely risky. And this has been proven in a famous case study about a complete rebuild that killed a company. In the early days of the internet, Netscape was a popular browser that dominated the market. The company's strategy was to focus just on the rewrite and not improve the old version. In the meantime, what happened is that they lost market share because competitors kept improving their products. And that, unfortunately, caused the end of Netscape. And was also a very sad moment because Netscape was my favorite browser. So now let's see how we can avoid making the same mistakes. And I think we should start from asking the right question. Instead of should you build your backend, the right question is how do we evolve while the business keeps running? It's simple, and the only thing you need is 5 practical steps. So let's start with step number 1. Before making any change to your application that works, we must understand our system. So in this list here, we have the list of common risk areas that require attention. And as you can see, there are many things to consider. So our focus should be on identifying where the real risk is. It is not hard, but it requires an analytical approach. And for this first step, I have created several AI prompts that you can find down in the description. So once you have identified the risks, you need to create a plan based on priority. And this is step number 2. So this part can be a little bit tricky if you don't know where to start or if you have limited technical experience. But it's easier than you think if you break it down into 2 sub-steps. The first one is to use AI to build a plan for each of these risks one at a time. Again, prompts is down in the description. And the second step is to ask for a review. You can do this online using online communities. Reddit is quite genuine and people want to help, or you can find an expert. Also, if you find an expert, because you have done all the legwork, even if it's a paid review of your analysis, it will be way cheaper than hiring a developer or a consultancy for a full assessment. So at the end of this step 2, you're gonna have a list of priorities and they will form your roadmap for the next 6 months. Most people fail here because they start changing their backend without protection. But this next step will let you move fast without breaking everything. And step number 3 is about building your safety harness. So imagine you are climbing a mountain. Without a harness, you move slow because a simple mistake means game over. With a harness instead, you move confidently because even if you slip, you can try again. So this safety harness is given by what is called test coverage. It's just a fancy way to say write code that protects what works. So in this phase, you want to test at minimum things like payments, login, and critical user journeys. Essentially all the things that make your app work. How to do it? In the same way you use AI to generate code, you can generate tests for that code. For example, you can ask AI to write a test for the user login. You want to make sure one thing, that the code that is written doesn't change the code that already exists. What you want to do is having some sort of app that tests your app. So once you have built your harness, you are protected. And the next step is controlling where and how changes happen. And the step 4 is about controlled environment. Now, let's simplify something that sounds more complicated than it is. An environment is just a copy of your application running in a separate place. It's the same system but different purpose. The goal here is simple. We want to test changes safely before real users see them. You don't need to have many environments. For most growing products, 2 are enough. So what we want to have is a testing environment and a production environment. The testing environment is where we experiment. So in this environment, you deploy new code, or you run tests, or you simulate real usage. And if something happens here, nothing happens to customers. And this is extremely liberating. We can see this environment as a safe playground. Next to the testing environment, we have the production environment. So this is where the real system is. Here we have real users, we have real data, and we have real money. So nothing goes here unless already works in testing. And why this matters? Because if you change production directly, you are testing on customers. So if you use a testing environment first, you catch problems before customers ever see them. And that single separation eliminates a huge percentage of production failures. So the one rule here is change in testing, verify everything works, then promote to production, and never the other way around. So now that we have the list of tasks ordered by priorities, protected our backend with tests, and built our testing environment, we can start migrating our backend. So the loop we need to follow is simple. So we change one thing, we apply in the testing environment, and we promote to production. So now you know the process, and you may be wondering, okay, Anto, but where does AI actually help? AI can be extremely useful when you are improving or evolving your backend, but only if you use it in the right way. And AI is very good at writing code, but is also very good at reading code and giving you suggestions about what needs to be improved. But there are 2 mistakes that you must avoid at all costs. So the mistake number 1 is asking things like, make my backend rock solid. I know that you have done that, but AI won't help in that case. And the number 2 is thinking that this is a weekend project. So all the software companies dedicate more time to improve old code that is making money than adding new features. AI should not be seen as the decision maker because it doesn't understand your risk tolerance, your customers, or the consequences of failure. So the right way to think about AI is simple. Use AI as an accelerator, but never as an authority. So if you want structured guidance, I have included down in the description a set of prompts that you can use to analyze your backend, identify risks, plan migrations, design tests, and structure safe changes step by step. You can copy them and use directly with your AI tools. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching, and bye.